Hello from Oslo, Norway. I have some updates about CV which I didn't mention last time. After discussing with some students and researchers, I think it's important to emphasize about, for example, about the grants. In your CV, you can include the grants which you obtain as a student, as often travel grants or some grants for go to conference or for collaboration. This is very useful and you can include it. But I've seen some students and postdocs put grants that PI, a professor, obtained. And they say, oh, but I work on this project. I work on this project, so I put this grant in my CV. No, it's not right. You only put a grant that you wrote and you got with your name on it. If your professor, your group leader, your boss get a grant, it's not your grant. You don't put it in your CV. But you can mention that you work on this project in another section. You have a section of your experience. You can write that, okay, I work on this project for some years. It's fine, but don't call it, it's not your grant. Only person who get it. The same about conferences, because I've seen some people have a very long list of conferences. Most of all, if it's just abstract and conference for biologists is not important. It's is almost no value if you just have a, even if you have a poster there. Okay, maybe for master student is good, but for PhD student you need to have papers, not posters. It's too low for you. But moreover, some people put like, oh, my name was co-author in abstract in a conference. Oh no, don't do this. It's also like misleading. If a conference, you can specify, okay, I was an invited speaker on a conference. This is useful. Well, for master student, you can say that I presented a poster on this conference. You may or may not list all the authors. I usually don't list because, well, for papers it's important. If you present on a conference a talk or poster, it's you who presents, so you can write it. On this conference, I presented the talk. On this conference, I presented the poster. It's not very important to say all the co-authors on the abstract in the conference. But if your student presented and put you as a co-author, then you don't put it in your CV. If your supervisor presented and put you as a co-author, you don't put it in your CV. It's your supervisor was invited to give a talk. Your supervisor should put in his or her CV, but not you. Even if your name is in acknowledgement, you don't put this conference in your CV. Then some people, before going for PhD, they do teaching. They have teaching experience in a high school, in university. So it's a good to make a section in your CV called teaching. And then you can specify that you were teaching in this course, when it was, where it was, which university, which country, which city. If you can mention how many students were in a course, especially if it's a big course. Say if it's 100 students, 50 students, 200, you can mention it. Sometimes there's 9 people attending your course, then maybe you don't need to say it because it's you don't have to be very proud if it's a low attendance, but you can be proud if it's over 100 people and you were teaching, you had this experience. Yes, say it. Moreover, in Norway, for example, PhD positions, there are two types. One is a 3 years, 3 years the pure research, and another one is a 4 years, and it includes 3 years of research and 1 year of teaching, or 75% of research and 25% of teaching, which you can distribute through the course. Sometimes they forget about you, you don't teach anything, and if you really want to get this experience, you have to go and ask. Even if it's written in your contract, they not always remember to offer you opportunity to teach. Sometimes you need to be after your administration and ask to do it, because later it will be useful for academic career. But for applying for a PhD, then yeah, you need to specify that you did teaching. If you did, if you did not, it's also fine, because if it's just a research position, you don't have to teach. For postdocs, what I've seen, it's more rare to teach than for students. For PhD students, sometimes they have it in a contract that they teach, but for postdocs, it's more exceptional, because postdocs it's more um, research, and they can be co-supervisors for master and PhD students, but teaching is more rare. So about supervision, again, if you were like a long time in research, and it happens that you supervised junior students during your studies, you put some efforts to educate them, mention it, put it in your CV. Make a section in your CV, call it supervision. Describe when, how many students, what kind of students, bachelor or junior master student, or maybe it's a high school students sometimes. Do you have shared publications with them? Mention it. It would be nice if information is also confirmed in a letter of recommendation, because, well, if you just write that I supervise 10 master students when I was a master student, it might be a little bit suspicious. But if like two people who provide you letter of recommendation mentions the same, yes, this candidate is strong and already proven as a supervisor and was helping to supervise bachelor master students, yeah, you put it in your CV, and also ideally in a recommendation letters, so somebody can prove it. About publications, all your publications, when you are co-author, you have to put it. Usually publications are in the end of a CV. If you have too many conference talks, invited lectures, it is also possible to separate them, because sometimes you give lectures and conferences, and sometimes you go to universities, like invited lecture, and talk about your project. So this is like two different sections. If there were also public talks, media presentations, like newspapers, TV, radio, all this very important part, and you can make independent section called the media presentation, something like this, and mention when you talk about research, or your research is highlighted in the newspaper, in the radio, on TV. This is appreciated by universities. Publications usually listed at the end of a CV, but some people, there are different strategies. Some people can first mention the recent publication in like 2021, and then go from newer to older, and the end of the list will be the very first publication, like maybe 1999 or 1975, depending when you publish the first one. But other people do other way around. They put the older one first. They say, okay, my first paper 2007, and then next one 2008, 2009, and so on. And the one you published yesterday, you put in the end of the list. But this is more rare. Usually people start with the most recent, like the one you published yesterday, you put it first. The one you put in a preprint by archive, you even put it before. Then sometimes publications, if you have several, some job calls, they ask to do it, or grant calls, and sometimes people just do it for better system. You can divide to several sections your publications. Original articles, one section, then reviews, review papers, it's another section. When it's not original, you just review a literature. And the editorials, if you were ever editor of a journal, you write editorials. They also can go independent, because editorials usually not peer reviewed. Review articles and original articles, they are peer reviewed, and there is a difference for human resources, for whoever will evaluate your application. Then I got a question: is English certificate is required for PhD program in Norway? I'm not sure. You need to check it with the program. I guess not, and I asked a German student. So for Germany, at least, it's not required. And me, I also never pass any official English language tests. But I see that some people put it. So if you already have it, just put it. It's an advantage, of course. But if you don't have it yet and your English is good enough, maybe you don't need. Just check with your program. Then another question was, should I study Norwegian before applying a PhD or postdoc position in Norway? No. Of course, it's good if you already speak a language of a country where you live, but it's not a requirement. Usually, most foreigners, there are many foreigners, so they speak English, and this is enough to get a job, is enough to start. If you just plan to be in Norway half a year, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, it's good if you spend your free time and study Norwegian. It will be appreciated. But again, if you plan to leave the country, it will be a big investment from your side. Of course, if you plan to stay in Norway longer for family reasons or because you love the country, it's a very good country, then it's definitely worth studying the language. It's very important. But it's not mandatory to get a position. So there are many foreigners working in Norway as PhD students, as postdocs, as researchers. And if they do not have a strong plan to stay in Norway, usually they do not study Norwegian, or they study it in a very beginning level in parallel with their work. And then I wanted to mention something for PhD students, for candidates. If you are applying for a PhD position or postdoc position and you are ranked number 2 or number 3, it actually can mean that you are doing very good. And the reason is because sometimes people know the candidate before they advertise a position. This is something that in academia you learn at some point, and then nobody talks about it because people pretend that it's a secret, and they pretend that nobody knows, but everybody knows about it at the same time. That sometimes in Europe, when you have a good candidate and you want to extend a contract or you want to hire this candidate, you must do a public announcement of a position. And then many good candidates, they don't understand that the candidate is already known before the position was advertised. Many people apply for a job and then they get super disappointed when they don't get it because they feel that they fit very well the job. So if you are finished number 2 or number 3, think that maybe they already knew a candidate, and this is just a system. It works like this. You don't know. Sometimes they really looking for somebody, looking for you, and sometimes they already have a person, but they have to do advertisement because by law it's like this. And I wish the system improve a little bit, so people save their time and efforts, and they do not send hundreds of applications when candidate is known in advance. I wish there's a way to improve the system, but for now it's like this. And still, just keep applying, and you will get a job sooner or later. Just do it right way and do it long enough. Okay, enough for today.